Before you dive into this story, ask yourself one thing. What would you do if the most cursed family in American history wanted to marry you? Iron Hollow was a place the government erased from every map. A place where women vanished. A place where no child was ever born without a price. But in 1874, something far worse was discovered. Triplet brothers who had married every woman in their bloodline and who were preparing a wedding far more horrifying than anything the world had ever seen. And when the last surviving girl of the family tried to run, the dead women of Iron Hollow climbed out of their graves to stop her. Tonight, you're about to uncover what the Triplet brothers did in the dark, what they worshipped beneath their cabin, and why every generation of women tried to burn that family off the face of the earth. If you think you've heard every kind of horror, you haven't heard Iron Hollow yet. Welcome to Forgotten Remains. Iron Hollow was already cursed before the triplets were born. But after that winter night in 1892, the land didn't just feel haunted, it felt owned. Snow hammered the crooked roofs of the tiny mountain town, the gusts rattling window frames like skeletal fingers tapping from the outside. In the old iron house, lanterns flickered low, casting long, twitching shadows on the wooden walls. Inside, Evelyn Iron was screaming, not the scream of a woman in labor. The scream of a woman being torn open by something that wasn't meant to be born the way everything else is. The midwife, Abigail Rowan, was shaking so violently she could barely hold her cloth. She had delivered dozens of babies in the Ozarks, but she had never seen a birth that made the oil lamps gutter out and reignite on their own. The first baby slid out silent as a corpse. Then its lungs filled with air, and it exhaled a sound that was not a cry but a ragged whisper, almost like a warning. The second came moments later, eyes already open, staring directly at Abigail with a cold intelligence newborns aren't supposed to have. The third didn't cry at all. He only tilted his head slowly, as if listening to footsteps no one else could hear. 3 brothers. 3 bodies sharing one breath. 3 sets of eyes that watched the room the way predators study their territory. Evelyn begged Abigail not to place them together, but Abigail's trembling hands were already moving, arranging the babies on the blanket. The moment the 3 touched, the wind outside went still. Then the room filled with a low humming, a vibration deep enough that the wooden bed frame rattled. Abigail grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Evelyn sobbed, "Oh God, they already know." Abigail whispered, "Know what?" Though part of her never wanted the answer. Evelyn's voice cracked. The Iron Hollow takes triplets to lead the family. And these 3, they're the ones the cult has been waiting for. Abigail froze. Everyone in the mountains whispered about the Iron Hollow family oath. How every woman born into the family was marked at birth with an oath older than the town itself. A forced allegiance. A binding. A cult that kept its power through the women of the bloodline, offering them as vessels in rituals no outsider ever witnessed. But Abigail had always believed the stories were superstition, until she looked down and saw the 3 newborn brothers holding hands, their tiny fingers gripping each other's wrists with impossible strength, as if forming a circle. A circle of 3. The exact symbol carved into the trees around Iron Hollow for generations. Evelyn's face turned gray. They're chosen, all 3. The humming grew louder. The lantern flames leaned sideways, though the air was still. Then the newborns began breathing in perfect unison. Slow. Rhythmic. Like 3 lungs sharing a single heartbeat. The floorboards vibrated beneath Abigail's boots. The walls creaked. Snow on the windows melted in long streaks. Abigail backed away, covering her mouth. The triplets all turned their heads at the same time, with the same movement, toward the midwife. Their eyes glowed faintly in the lamplight, not bright, just aware. Evelyn screamed, "Don't look at them! They mark the first woman they see. Don't let them see you." But it was too late. The 3rd brother blinked, slowly, deliberately, and Abigail felt a storm of cold air rush through her chest. Something inside her shifted. Not a pain. A presence. She staggered backward, choking. What did they? Evelyn collapsed. The babies stopped humming. Then the smallest one, the silent one, spoke his first sound. A hoarse whisper that made every candle blow out at once. "One." As if claiming her, Abigail fled the house screaming through the snow, leaving bloody footprints behind her. She didn't return home. She didn't return anywhere. By morning, they found her in the woods, standing upright, eyes glazed over, her fingernails carved into the bark of a tree. The same circle of 3. The triplets had chosen their first woman. They wouldn't stop there. They never stopped. The snow didn't melt for 3 more days, but the people of Iron Hollow swore they heard the wails of Abigail Rowan echoing through the woods long after she died. Some said her voice came from the trees. Others swore the sound crawled under their doors at night, entering the house like a cold draft. But the Iron family said nothing. They never spoke of the midwife again. Instead, they watched the triplets grow, too fast, too aware, too connected. Evelyn Iron, pale and shaking, tried to keep them hidden from the rest of the family. But Iron Hollow wasn't a normal place, and the Iron family wasn't a normal bloodline. Their relatives lived in scattered cabins throughout the valley, bound by an oath older than any church in the region. They weren't farmers. They weren't hunters. They were keepers of something. Something old, something buried, something inherited. And the birth of the triplets, it was a sign the cult had been waiting for. On the night the boys turned 7 days old, a line of lanterns appeared on the ridge, the family coming down the mountain. All women, no men. Silent, moving in single file through the snow. Evelyn felt her blood freeze. She knew why they were here. The door creaked open, and matriarch Cora Iron stepped inside, the oldest living woman of the bloodline, her spine bent but her eyes sharp as rusted blades. She looked at Evelyn's newborn sons with something that resembled reverence and hunger. 3 born as one, Cora whispered, touching each infant's forehead with her cracked fingertips. They will bind every daughter of our bloodline. They will keep the legacy alive. They are our iron breath. Evelyn shook her head. They're just children. No, Cora snapped. They are the leaders. Behind her, the other iron women filled the room, their lantern flames shivering as if affected by something unseen. Cora reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a bowl carved from iron ore, dark as dried blood. A bowl every iron woman feared. Evelyn choked. It's too soon. It begins tonight. Cora lifted the bowl and poured something into it, a mixture of willow ash, crushed bone, and dark red lake clay from the valley. The ritual ink, the mark, the binding. From the shadows, the youngest girls of the family stepped forward. Evelyn's nieces. Her cousins. Barefoot, trembling, yet unable to resist the pull of the ritual. They formed a circle around the 3 newborn triplets. Evelyn tried to block Cora's path. You can't mark them this early. Cora raised her hand and Evelyn flew backward, as if shoved by invisible force, crashing into the wall so hard she tasted blood. The lanterns flickered. The babies began humming again. Low. Unified. The same unnatural humming Abigail had heard before she died. Cora dipped her fingers into the bowl and approached the infants. But something stopped her. The 3rd brother, the silent one, lifted his head. A newborn shouldn't move like that. A newborn shouldn't watch like that. His eyes fixed on Cora, unblinking, cold, ancient. Cora froze. Her breath hitched. Then, in a voice barely audible, he whispered, "No." And the room changed. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. The lantern flames pulled sideways. The logs in the fireplace cracked and spat, then died completely. Cora staggered, dropping the bowl. The ink splattered across the wooden floorboards, snaking in lines and patterns that formed shapes no one recognized, but every woman felt. The youngest girl in the circle screamed. Her breath turned to frost. The babies were breathing in unison again. 3 rising chests, 3 falling chests, 1 heartbeat shared among 3 bodies. The humming grew louder. Louder, until the windows rattled in their frames. Evelyn clawed at the floor, trying to stand. "Stop," she cried. "You're killing them." But the humming wasn't hurting the girls. It was calling them. Every woman in the room dropped to her knees, gasping as if something was pulling the air from their lungs, pulling their will from their bones. Cora's hands shook uncontrollably. The boys, they're performing the rite by themselves. The triplets weren't being marked. They were doing the marking. The eldest infant lifted his tiny hand. Not toward Cora, but toward the trembling youngest girl. A small dot of darkness appeared on the back of her neck, a mark forming out of nothing, as if burned into her skin by invisible fire. She choked, collapsing, her body seizing. Behind her, another girl fell. And another. And another. One by one, every woman in that cabin, from age 5 to 80, received the same mark. The Iron family didn't choose the triplets. The triplets chose the family. Evelyn screamed until her voice broke. Cora wept with terror, whispering, "They're too strong. They don't need us. They don't need the ritual." They are the ritual. The humming stopped. Every lantern went out. Silence. Then the middle triplet opened his eyes fully for the first time, pupils dilated black, swallowing the firelight whole. He whispered one chilling word, "Ours," and every woman in that room felt something inside her shift. A tether tightening. A chain clicking shut. An allegiance forced upon their blood that none of them could break. The triplets had completed their first binding, at 7 days old, and Iron Hollow would never breathe freely again. The morning after the ritual, Iron Hollow looked the same, but everyone who lived there felt something underneath the frost. Something shifting. Something watching. Most towns in the Ozarks feared wolves, storms, and sickness. Iron Hollow feared the forest. And after the triplets were born, the forest seemed to fear them back. Evelyn Iron barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way her newborn sons had stared at the women. As if claiming property. As if choosing servants. As if the entire bloodline was nothing more than an inheritance. But the worst part wasn't their eyes. It was what the women whispered about the next morning. Their marks moved. Not like a rash, not like a scab. The blackened circle of 3 lines, the mark that appeared on their skin, had seemed to crawl during the night, settling deeper, darkening as though ink was being pumped from beneath the skin. Some women said it felt warm. Some said it felt ice cold. One claimed she heard it whisper her name. Evelyn tried to tell herself the stories were exaggerations, fear twisting reality. But when she checked the back of her own neck in the cracked wash basin mirror, she saw the same mark. Fresh. Dark. Alive. She sank to the floor, shaking. They hadn't just claimed the family. They had claimed her too. That afternoon, while the women whispered in terror indoors, the men of Iron Hollow grew restless outside. They heard rumors that Abigail Rowan had died marked, that the triplets were unnatural, that the family's old legends were awakening. The Iron Men had always been outsiders to their own bloodline's rituals. Useful for labor, kept at a distance, but this time they felt excluded in a way that frightened them. They gathered near the tree line, huddling against the wind. 4 men, all carrying old rifles, not to shoot, but for courage. Henry Rowan, Abigail's brother, was the first to speak. "They say those babies made a mark burn itself onto my sister's skin. You really think a newborn did that?" another man muttered. Henry spit into the snow. "I'm just saying Abigail weren't no hysteric. And I found her fingernails dug into that tree bark deeper than any human strength." The men fell silent, because everyone knew something else about Iron Hollow. Even if you didn't believe the legends, the forest did. And the forest chose sides. Henry looked up at the mountains and added, "I want to see those children." The other men shifted uneasily. Iron Hollow tradition said no man touched the newborn leaders. Even Evelyn's husband, David Iron, wasn't allowed to look at them directly. But fear overrides tradition, and anger overrides fear. So as the last bit of daylight faded, the men stepped into the Iron Hollow woods. The deeper they walked, the more wrong the forest felt. Birds stopped singing. Wind stopped moving. Not a single branch cracked under their boots, as if the ground muffled their steps to keep them from waking something. Henry stopped abruptly. "What's that?" On the trunks of 3 trees, a perfect triangle, were fresh carvings. 3 lines. 3 lines. 3 lines. The triplet symbol. Henry swallowed hard. Someone marked these. Women must have done another ritual, but the markings weren't carved with tools. The gouges were too precise. Too clean. Almost melted into the bark. One of the men approached and pressed his thumb against a groove. It burned. He yanked his hand back, cursing. The tip of his thumb blistered instantly. Henry whispered, "The wood ain't hot. It's alive." But before anyone could respond, the forest around them went silent. Completely, unnaturally, horrifyingly silent. Then they heard it. A distant humming. Low. Familiar. Exactly like the sound the women described during the ritual. Henry froze. That's the boys. The humming grew louder. And louder. And louder, until they felt it vibrating in their chests. Then, every tree around them began to lean. Not from wind, not from weight, but as if bowing towards something marching through the woods. Branches bent, roots twisted, bark split open in long, jagged cracks. One of the men whispered, "Jesus Christ, they're moving." Henry aimed his rifle, even though he knew it would do nothing. Snow crunched. Something was approaching. Something small. Something slow. Something breathing in perfect rhythm. Then the humming stopped, and the forest exhaled. The men were sure they'd see wolves, or a ritual circle, or women dragging torches. They saw none of that. Instead, 3 babies stood in the snow, 7 days old. Barefoot, silent, staring. They weren't carried by anyone. They weren't crawling. They were standing, tiny bodies perfectly balanced, unblinking, watching the men. Henry stepped backward. No, that ain't possible." The eldest triplet tilted his head, mimicking Henry's movements exactly. The middle triplet blinked slowly, and every tree around them groaned, as if reacting. The youngest triplet raised his hand, a gesture so small, so fragile, and the entire forest answered. Branches snapped, roots split the ground, snow exploded upward like a breath being released. The trees bent inward, closing around the men like a cage. Henry screamed and fired his rifle, but the bullet never reached anything. A branch whipped through the air and knocked it from his hand. The humming started again. The babies didn't move their lips, but the sound poured out of the trees, out of the ground, out of every shadow in Iron Hollow. Henry stumbled, collapsing onto his knees. "Stop!" he cried. "They're just children." The youngest triplet stepped forward, snow melting around his bare feet. He whispered one word, the same word he spoke the night Abigail died. "One." The forest lunged. The trees didn't strangle the men. They didn't crush them. They marked them. One line burned across Henry's shoulder. one on his chest, one on his throat. He shrieked, but the babies simply watched. The other men collapsed, screaming as the marks carved themselves into their skin, the same mark as the women, but incomplete. Corrupted. Forced. Wrong. The forest released them. The trees straightened. The roots slid back into the earth. The humming faded. When Henry looked up, the triplets were gone. But the marks weren't. 3 incomplete lines, the sign of the unbound. The sign of the disobedient. Henry staggered to his feet, sobbing in terror. "They ain't children," he whispered. "They ain't human." He ran back to the town, screaming for help, but he didn't notice that every time he exhaled, a faint humming followed his breath. The forest had claimed him, and it was only the beginning. The storm that had been circling Iron Hollow for 2 days finally broke open the moment Rachel Holloway lit the last candle in the basement. A thunderboom shook the entire farmhouse, but she didn't flinch, because she already knew. Someone or something was awake. The Iron Hollow Triplets, not the boys everyone believed they were, not the humans the town feared they were, but the ancient things that had been inside them ever since the night they were born. Rachel clutched her lantern tighter as the wind moaned through the gaps in the old plank walls. The flame flickered violently, almost like it was trying to warn her, "Run now while you still can." But she didn't run. She lifted the lantern toward the basement's stone wall. Carved into it were the names of every woman in their bloodline. Hester Holloway, 1827. Marjorie Holloway, 1852. Ellen Holloway, 1864. Judith Holloway, 1869. Ruth Holloway, 1871. And now, Rachel Holloway, 1874. Each name slashed across with a dark, resin-like mark. But that wasn't what made her knees weaken. Below each name was a symbol. A circle, a triangle, a spiral. The same symbols the triplets had carved into the trees of Iron Hollow. The same symbols that appeared on the skin of the women who went missing. The same symbols that had begun forming, faintly but unmistakably, on her own arms. A cold breath touched the back of Rachel's neck. She didn't move. She didn't dare. She whispered, "Which one are you?" A voice, low, distorted, layered with 3 echoes, answered behind her. "We share one mouth, Rachel." Her lantern shook so violently, she almost dropped it. She turned slowly. There was no one in the room, but the smell of wet soil filled the air, and the sound of bare feet dragging across the basement steps. 1 step. 2 steps. 3. The triplets' voices came again, speaking in turns, speaking over each other, speaking from different corners of the basement. "We were chosen before birth. We were bound before breath. We were promised every woman of Holloway blood." Rachel backed into the stone wall. Her fingers brushed one of the carved names. Ruth Holloway. Her older sister. Gone 3 years ago. Taken. Claimed. Rachel swallowed hard. "Why me? What do you want from us? From me?" The voices stopped. The basement fell silent. Then the candle flames bent as if pulled toward a single point in the room, and the triplets spoke together in one voice so deep it rattled the stone. "You are the last, the final hollow vessel. When the bloodline ends, we will no longer be bound to this house." Rachel's throat tightened. "Bound? By who?" Silence, then a whisper, this time soft, almost human, drifted to her ear. "By our mother." A bolt of cold shot through her. Not their mother, not her grandmother, but the original mother of Iron Hollow. The woman the family never spoke of. The woman whose portrait was sealed behind cloth. The woman whose journal her father had burned in the middle of the night. A woman the town called the first bride. But Rachel didn't get to think about it, because the basement door slammed shut, and the whispering began. 100 voices. Women's voices. Crying. Gasping. Begging. Their names vibrating on the stone walls like trapped souls pounding to escape. And then the triplets stepped out of the shadows. Not fully formed. Not fully human. But tall. Far too tall. Bone thin. With limbs that didn't bend right and eyes black as tar. One stood in front of her. One stood behind her. One crouched beside her ear. The one behind her leaned close and whispered. The others tried to run. The one to her left whispered, "But we caught them." The one in front whispered, "You won't run. You were born knowing we'd come." Rachel felt her pulse hammering, her breath shaking. "I won't let you take me," she said, but her voice trembled. The front triplet tilted his head unnervingly. "We already have." He lifted his hand and touched the symbol carved beside her sister's name. The moment his finger met the stone, Rachel's vision snapped. Her ears roared. The basement dissolved, and she was somewhere else. A dark forest. A circle of stones. Women crying. Torches burning. 3 tall figures standing around a blood-filled basin. And at the center, the first bride, chanting something Rachel couldn't understand. But she understood one thing. This was a ritual that had been repeated for more than 100 years. A ritual her bloodline was built on. A ritual the first bride created. A ritual the Triplet brothers were born to complete. The vision shattered, and Rachel stumbled back into the basement, gasping for breath. The triplets watched her with cold curiosity. "Why? Why do you show me this?" she whispered. The front one leaned in until his nose almost touched hers. "Because you must choose." Rachel froze. "Choose what?" All 3 heads tilted in perfect, unnatural synchronicity. "Which one of us will claim you?" Before Rachel could scream, all the candles blew out at once. Darkness swallowed the room. And the episode ends exactly at that last breath. The darkness didn't feel like an absence of light. It felt alive, thick, heavy. Breathing around her, Rachel pressed a hand to the cold basement floor, struggling to steady herself as her pulse hammered in her skull. Somewhere in that blackness, the triplets moved, silently, effortlessly, inhumanly. A breath, not hers, touched the back of her neck. Then a voice, soft and childlike, whispered, "We were born together." Another voice, deeper, older, to her left, "We were bound together." A third voice, empty, hollow, inches from her face, "But you will not be bound to all 3. A faint glow flickered to life overhead, not from a candle, from a symbol, drawn in some kind of dark, glistening resin on the ceiling. A spiral surrounded by 3 uneven circles. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. As it glowed brighter, the basement dimly lit up. And Rachel saw them. The Iron Hollow Triplets, not as boys, not as men, but as elongated, wrong-shaped shadows standing taller than any human should. If they had been 7 feet before, they looked 8 now. Black eyes, long fingers, jaws slightly too wide, like something inside them struggled to mimic humanity. Rachel scrambled backward until her spine hit the stone wall. One of them, she couldn't tell which, stepped forward. His voice slid across the room like a blade dragging across bone. "To break the ritual, we need a Holloway woman." Another voice answered, "To finish the ritual, we need a Holloway woman." The third stepped closer, lowering his face to hers. "And you are the last." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "I am not choosing anything," she whispered. The triplets smiled, each with the same slow, unnatural curl of the lips. "You don't choose. You declare. To whom your blood responds." Rachel's breath hitched. "My blood? What does that even mean?" The front triplet extended a hand. At the tip of each long finger, something glowed faintly, tiny moving shapes like black insects crawling beneath his skin. He touched Rachel's wrist, and she screamed, because under her skin, right where the faint symbols had been appearing, something moved. Not like blood flowing, like blood waking. A burning swirl rose beneath the surface of her skin, forming a small spiral that matched the symbol on the ceiling. The triplets inhaled sharply, in unison, as if her reaction fed them. The one behind her whispered, voice trembling with hunger, "She carries the first bride's mark." The one on her left leaned close enough for her to smell damp soil on his breath. Just like the others, Rachel shook her head violently. "No. No, I'm not part of this. I never chose this. I don't want this." The basement floor trembled. The glowing spiral on the ceiling pulsed faster. Thump, thump, thump. The shadows of the triplets stretched across the walls like reaching arms. The front triplet crouched until his face was level with hers, his head bending at an angle no human spine could manage. "Your line was chosen long before you were born." He reached out, brushing aside her hair. "Every Holloway woman has belonged to us." The one behind her whispered, "Your mother." The one to her left whispered, "Your sister." Then, the front one, almost tenderly, "And now, you." Rachel pressed her hands against the ground, ready to shove herself up and run, anywhere, even if it meant death. But the basement door slammed open. All 3 triplets snapped their heads upward, nostrils flaring, shadows peeled back like smoke. And on the stairs, a figure stood holding a lantern, her father, Jonah Holloway. But he looked different, older, gaunter, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in years. His voice cracked with gravel and fear. "Rachel, don't speak to them." The triplets hissed in unison, a sound like air whistling through broken ribs. Jonah shouted, Get away from her, Rachel gasped. Dad! You knew about them? You knew. He nodded once, jaw trembling. Since the day you were born. The triplets stepped forward, raising their long arms toward him, but Jonah lifted something from his coat. A small wooden object. A carved figurine. The symbol of the first bride burned into its chest. All three triplets recoiled violently. The walls shook. The ceiling spiral pulsed like a dying heart. Jonah descended the stairs fast. Rachel, get up. Now. There's no time. But before he could reach her, the triplets vanished. Their shadows slipped into the cracks of the stone walls like water disappearing into soil. The basement fell silent. The spiral on the ceiling darkened. Rachel shivered uncontrollably. Her father kneeled beside her, grabbing her shoulders. His voice broke. Rachel, they won't stop now. You should never have come down here. She stared at him, tears streaking her face. Dad, what are they? His expression collapsed. He whispered the words like a confession. They're not just your cousins. They're the first bride's sons, and you were promised to them the night you took your first breath. Rachel's heart plummeted, but before she could speak, a hand, thin, black-eyed, impossibly long, slithered out from a crack in the wall behind her father and gripped Jonah Holloway by the throat. Jonah Holloway didn't even have time to scream. The hand that burst from the wall wasn't skin. It looked like soil packed over bone, fingers shaped from roots and hardened by centuries underground. The grip tightened around his throat, lifting him off the ground with horrifying ease. Rachel froze. Her father's boots scraped helplessly across the basement floor. His lantern swung wildly, throwing frantic shadows across the stone walls. Dad! Rachel lunged forward, but another hand shot from the opposite wall, grabbing her arm with a cold that cut deep into her skin. The triplets were returning, not fully formed, not as boys, not as shadows, but something between both. The first triplet pulled himself from the stone like a corpse climbing out of packed earth, his long torso stretching unnaturally before it snapped into place. His black eyes locked on Rachel. The second emerged beside him, head twisting until his jaw crackled into a sickening grin. The third, still holding Jonah by the throat, whispered with a voice layered with dozens of trapped echoes. He kept you from us. Jonah kicked violently, choking out. Rachel, run. The third triplet tightened his grip. Rachel screamed, clawing at the fingers wrapped around her arm. Let him go. He's my father. The first triplet leaned close to her face. He was a caretaker. The second, not a father. The third, raising Jonah higher. Your blood belongs to us. Rachel felt something break inside her. Fear snapped. Something darker took its place. Rage, desperation, the instinct to survive. She grabbed the lantern Jonah dropped and smashed it against the wall. Glass exploded. Flames roared. The triplet holding her recoiled, the first sign of weakness she'd seen. Jonah fell to the floor, gasping, coughing violently. Rachel grabbed him under the arms. Dad, get up. Please, get up. But he pushed her away with shaking hands. Rachel, listen. His voice was shredded, but his eyes were sharp with terror. You can't fight them. You can't run from them. He grabbed her wrist, hard. Rachel, you must finish what your mother died trying to do. Her heart stopped. My mother? Jonah nodded, trembling all over. She didn't die of fever. His voice cracked like breaking stone. She died trying to break the first bride's curse. Rachel staggered backward. The basement seemed to tilt. Her ears rang. Before she could speak, the triplets straightened, three tall silhouettes against the torching shadows. The middle one stepped forward, mocking Jonah's weakened breaths. Your mother failed. The second, your sister failed. The first, tilting his head at Rachel. You will fail too. Jonah lurched to his feet, clutching the carved figurine with the first bride's mark. He held it out toward the triplets. Back, back, damn you! The symbol flared with pale blue fire. The triplets screeched, far too loud, too layered, too monstrous to be anything human, and recoiled violently. The lights flickered. The walls trembled. Rachel grabbed her father's arm. Dad, where did you get that? He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the triplets as the blue flame wavered in his shaking hand. But Rachel saw the truth. He was terrified. He wasn't a hunter. He wasn't trained. He didn't know how to use the figurine. He was stalling for time and fading fast. The triplets circled them. Their voices rolled around the basement like thunder. Give her to us. The blood calls. She is the last bride. Jonah roared back. She's not your bride. She's not anyone's. She's my daughter. The basement lights snapped off. Total darkness. A moment later, the triplets whispered together, Then you may die first. Jonah shoved the carved figurine into Rachel's hands. Run, he rasped. Run. Before she could move, three arms, impossibly long, shot out of the dark. One wrapped around Jonah's waist. One seized his shoulder. One gripped his face. Rachel screamed. Dad! The triplets pulled him backward toward the stone wall. His fingernails scraped the floor. He howled, raw, broken, agonizing. No, N-O, Rachel, run, Rachel, run. Then his body was yanked into the wall, and the stone closed behind him like wet clay sealing a grave. Rachel collapsed, sobbing, clutching the figurine so tightly it cut into her palm. The basement went silent. Then the triplets whispered from all around her, "Now it is just you." Rachel didn't remember standing. One moment she was kneeling on the cold stone floor, clutching the figurine, tears burning her eyes. The next, she was running. Barefoot. Blind. Panicked. Slamming her shoulder against walls, sweeping her hands through black air trying to find the staircase. Her father's last howl still echoed in her skull. No. N-O. Rachel, run. Rachel, run. She couldn't breathe. Every part of her felt carved open. She stumbled into the stair rail, dragging herself upward. But as soon as her foot hit the first step, the entire house moaned. The floorboards twisted under her, shifting like muscle beneath skin. The stairs stretched. One step became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 10. Rachel's lungs froze. The house was moving, rearranging itself, blocking her escape. The triplets' voices drifted up from the basement, soft and mocking. "You cannot leave our home. You were born inside its walls. You will be claimed inside its walls." She gripped the figurine tighter. The carved symbol on it throbbed warm against her palm. Something responded. The house shuddered. The steps snapped back into their original shape. Rachel didn't question why. She bolted up the stairs. She burst onto the first floor and slammed the basement door shut, her body shaking with violent sobs. The house was silent. For a moment, just a moment, she pressed her forehead against the door. "Dad, please, no, please." Her voice cracked and fell apart. The silence deepened. Then, a soft thump on the other side of the door, not a knock. A hand, dragging slowly down the wood. Rachel staggered back. Another thump, then a whisper. Too low, too stretched, too wrong to be human. "Rachel, open." She backed into the hallway, shaking her head. "No, no, you're not him, you're not him." A second voice joined the first. "You left him." A third, "He called for you." The three voices braided together. "And you ran." Rachel clamped her hands over her ears and ran toward the parlor. The house creaked as if following her. The hallway seemed longer than before. Doors she'd known her whole life were in the wrong places. Windows had moved. Pictures hung crooked, showing blurred, unfamiliar faces. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and the triplets were inside its walls. The parlor door was slightly open. Rachel pushed it and gasped. All the portraits of the Holloway women were uncovered. Even the ones that had been hidden for decades. Her grandmother, her great aunts, her mother, her sister, all staring down. And every portrait had been altered. Their eyes were scratched out. 3 slashes across each face. 3. Like the triplets, beneath each portrait, a symbol had been carved into the wall. Circle. Triangle. Spiral. Rachel trembled. "What do you want from me?" Her voice cracked into the empty parlor. The fire in the hearth suddenly roared to life, blowing sparks outward. The flames twisted into shapes, shadows of 3 tall figures. The triplets, their voices echoed through the flames. "You must choose your claimant." Rachel shook her head violently. "I am not choosing any of you." The flames crackled, laughing. "Every Holloway woman chooses." The fire dimmed. Whispering filled the room. Rachel turned. The portrait of her mother flickered. Her mother's painted hand, flat, lifeless, slowly lifted, pointing toward the old door at the back of the parlor. A door Rachel had never seen open in her life. The first bride's room. Her father had forbidden her from ever touching it. Rachel stared as the door handle slowly turned on its own. A cold breath rushed out from inside. A whisper, thin and ancient. "Come inside, child." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "No," she choked. "No, I can't." The triplets whispered from behind her, voices weaving together like a noose tightening around her throat. "Inside this room, your bloodline began. Inside this room, your mother made her pact. Inside this room, you will end it." Rachel took one trembling step backward. Then another, but the door creaked wider. A soft sound drifted out. Not a whisper, not a voice. A heartbeat. Slow, heavy. And not hers. The walls began to pulse with the same rhythm. Rachel pressed her back against the opposite wall. The figurine burned in her hand. The heartbeat grew louder. And then, from behind the door, a woman's silhouette stepped forward. Tall, veiled, hair long and blackened with age, hands folded, unmoving. The first bride. Her voice seeped into the hallway like smoke. Your father delayed the ritual. She lifted her head. Even behind the veil, Rachel felt the weight of her gaze. But you will complete it. Rachel couldn't breathe. Her knees threatened to collapse. The first bride opened her arms. Come to me, last daughter. Behind Rachel, the triplets whispered. Choose. 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 The house groaned. Lights flickered. Walls pulsed. The first bride stepped closer. The first bride glided out of the doorway like she wasn't walking at all, like she was drifting on a current of ancient breath. Her veil brushed the floor. Her bare feet made no sound. Her presence filled the hallway like black mold spreading through lungs. Rachel's fingers tightened around the carved figurine until splinters dug into her skin. The first bride extended a hand. Her voice was soft, but wrong, like three voices whispering through one throat. Child of my blood, come. Rachel stumbled backward until her shoulders hit the wall. Her breaths turned shallow, frantic. Stay away from me, she whispered. The first bride tilted her veiled head, the motion smooth and unnatural. I am not your enemy. Behind Rachel, the triplets hissed softly in the walls. We are her sons. We were born in her image. We will continue through you. Rachel slammed her palms over her ears, shaking her head. Stop! Stop talking. Just stop. The house moaned, boards bending under invisible weight. The portraits rattled on the walls. The floorboards beneath Rachel's feet pulsed like a living thing. The first bride raised both hands. The walls split open behind her. Inside the cracks, Rachel saw things moving, shapes like human silhouettes, but twisted, stretched, hanging as if suspended in liquid darkness. Daughters, previous brides, women who had been, quote, claimed. Their mouths hung open in silent screams. Rachel gagged, stumbling sideways. The first bride stepped forward, her veil fluttering as though underwater. Your mother tried to escape her duty. Her hand lowered gently, almost affectionately. But none of her line can. Rachel's pulse hammered in her ears. She died trying to fight you. The first bride stiffened, as if the words had cut her through the veil. Then she spoke, calm, chilling. She died because she chose the wrong son. The walls shivered. A cold wind swept the hallway. The triplets whispered beneath the boards. Rachel stared, horrified. My mother chose one of you? The first bride's veil dipped with a slow nod. Every Holloway woman must choose. Her arm extended, fingers long and skeletal beneath the fabric. A bond must be formed. Rachel's throat closed. No, I'm not doing this. The first bride stepped closer. The hallway lights flickered. And suddenly, Rachel was no longer in the hallway. The world blinked around her. The walls stretched out. The floor dissolved. Her vision swirled. Dark, red, then black again. She was standing in a round, candlelit room. The claiming room. The same room from the symbols. The room where the first bride had been chosen. Where her mother had tried and failed. 3 black candles burned in a triangle. Their smoke curled upward, forming the outlines of the triplet silhouettes around her. Rachel spun in a frantic circle. No, Eno, let me out. The first bride materialized behind her, tall and still, veil breathing like lungs over her face. You cannot leave the choosing. Rachel raised the figurine above her head, ready to smash it against the floor. If this is what binds me, then I'll destroy it. The first bride didn't move. She spoke with a smooth, devastating certainty. Destroying it will seal your fate, not free you. Rachel froze. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? The bride stepped closer, her veil inches from Rachel's face. Your blood will seek a claimant, whether you choose or not. If you break the bond ritual, your bloodline ends tonight. Rachel's stomach dropped. You're threatening to kill me? The bride lowered her head, voice turning almost mournful. If you do not choose one son, all 3 will take you. The triplets' silhouettes twisted tighter around her. Rachel backed into the wall, trembling. I don't want any of you. The candles flared. A voice behind her whispered through the smoke. Then choose the one who took your father. Rachel's heart dropped into her stomach. She turned. One silhouette stood taller. Darker. More violent. The one who dragged Jonah into the wall. A low growl rolled across the room. Choose me. Rachel shook uncontrollably. A second silhouette stepped forward, hands trembling, almost gently. She is frightened. A third leaned close. Soft, hungry voice quiet as breath on glass. But her fear makes her blood sweet. Rachel felt the room closing in, air turning thick and sour. No. I will never choose any of you. The first bride spoke sharply. Then your line ends here. The triplets lunged. Their shadows slammed into Rachel from all sides. She screamed, raw, primal, terrified, and the figurine in her hand exploded with a blast of cold blue fire. The triplets recoiled, screaming in layered voices. The first bride staggered backward, her veil whipping violently. Blue light flooded the room, swirling around Rachel. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. She collapsed to the floor, and the last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the first bride's voice, furious and echoing. You cannot escape the claim. The candles blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. The storm pounded Iron Hollow like a fist from the sky. Lightning split the forest as Mara ran barefoot across the soaked ground, her breath tearing in her chest. She wasn't running from the triplets this time. She was running toward the one place even the Iron Hollow brothers feared, the ash pit behind the main cabin, the place the family called the Woman's Mouth. Every Iron Hollow child was warned since birth. Never stand by the pit at night. Never look inside. Never answer when she whispers your name. Mara had heard those warnings. She had ignored every one of them, because tonight she needed answers. Answers that none of the living would give. Behind her, in the rain-drowned woods, she could hear the triplets moving. 3 sets of heavy footsteps, 3 voices calling out to her in that slow, eerie unison. Mara, come back. You belong to us. She didn't stop. She reached the clearing, a black circle of scorched earth, charred stones arranged in a ring. The pit in the center, no wider than a doorway, breathing out heat that didn't belong in the storm. Heat and the faint scent of rotting flowers. A voice rose from below, thin and cracked like burning wood. You finally came back to me. Mara froze. It was her mother's voice. But her mother had died 12 years ago, buried by the triplets' own hands. A shape shifted inside the pit, ashen fingers, long and blistered, gripping the rim. Mara staggered backward as the figure pulled itself up. It wasn't human, not fully. Hair made of soot. Skin like burnt clay. Eye sockets glowing faint gold, as if holding embers of a soul trying to crawl out. It rasped, "Daughter, they took everything from me." Thunder cracked. Behind Mara, branches snapped loudly. The triplets had reached the clearing. But for the first time, their footsteps slowed. The 3 giants stood frozen at the tree line, eyes wide, their mouths quivering. Fear. Actual fear, Reed whispered, barely audible above the storm. No, not her. Not the first wife. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. First wife? Her mother? Her mother had been their first wife? The creature climbed further out of the pit, the rain hissing angrily as it touched her burned skin. She pointed at the triplets, her finger cracked and smoking. You made vows to me. Blood vows. Bone vows. You promised your lives to me. The triplets stepped back, whimpering like cornered animals. But they didn't run. They didn't dare. The creature turned to Mara again. You are mine, not theirs. And you will break their line. The triplets shouted together. Stop listening to her. She'll take you down with her. But the creature spoke over them, her voice rising like a furnace. Look at me, Mara. Do you know why they married every woman in their family? Mara shook her head, trembling. The creature lifted her blistered jaw. Because they were trying to create a child who could survive the pit. A child who carried my blood. The storm paused for a breath. Then she whispered, a child like you. Mara's legs almost gave out. Her blood turned to ice. She wasn't running from the triplets anymore. She was running from her own destiny. But the creature wasn't finished. They stole my body. They burned me alive. They sealed me in this pit. But you carry my fire. The pit glowed brighter. The ground trembled. The triplets dropped to their knees, screaming in terror. The creature leaned close to Mara, her burned face impossibly soft, impossibly sad. Help me finish what they started, and I will set you free. The thunder boomed again, and the clearing filled with a low, inhuman humming. A chorus from the pit, dozens of whispers rising, dozens, hundreds. The voices of every woman the triplets had ever taken. Mara felt her breath slip away, because she realized the truth. Her mother wasn't the only one who wanted vengeance, and the pit wasn't deep because it was dug that way. It was deep because it was full. The screams from the pit grew louder, dozens of voices rising from below, crawling up the stone walls like swarming insects. The storm howled above the clearing, as if the sky itself was terrified of what was happening in Iron Hollow. Mara couldn't breathe. The burned creature, her mother, the first wife, held out a hand made of cracked charcoal and living embers. Every raindrop that hit her skin hissed into steam. Behind Mara, the triplets were on their knees, trembling violently, their massive bodies shaking with a fear she never thought they were capable of. Kane's voice cracked. If she climbs out, the valley dies. The creature turned her head, bones grinding. You already damned the valley the night you bound yourselves to me." The ground beneath their feet shuddered. The pit widened as if something enormous beneath was pushing outward. The voices grew louder, forming words. Pleas, warnings, curses. Don't let her loose. Finish the bloodline. Burn the boys. She will take everything. Mara stumbled backward. Her head spun. Her heart pounded. None of this made sense. Until the creature's ember-lit eyes fixed on her. You are the last one born of my blood. Lightning flared across the sky, turning the clearing white for a split second. In that flash, Mara saw what stood behind her mother. Dozens of figures. Silent. Burned. Female. All of them related to the triplets. All of them victims of the Iron Hollow marriages. All of them watching Mara. Waiting. The triplets crawled toward her, hands out desperately. Samuel gasped. Mara, don't listen. She'll drag you into the pit with her. Reed cried out. We kept you safe all these years. We protected you from her. Cain whispered. Please, don't leave us. We love you. Those last words hit her like a blade. Because they weren't lying. They did love her. Twisted, possessive, obsessive, but real in their monstrous way. The creature stepped forward again, steam rising off her burned throat. They love you because you carry my heart. Her voice softened. But I died screaming your name. A gust of wind hurled ash across the clearing. The pit glowed hotter, orange, red, white, until the very edges began to melt. Mara covered her ears. The voices inside were now chanting something rhythmic, ancient. A ritual the triplets had failed to complete decades ago. The creature raised both arms toward the storm. Her shadow exploded across the trees. Tonight, my blood returns to me. The triplets surged forward, dropping onto their hands, desperate. Cain roared, No! She's ours! It was like watching wild animals fight a fire. The burned women behind the creature stepped out of the shadows. Their hollow faces glowed, their hair floated like smoke. Their hands reached for the triplets in unison. Dozens of them. Reed tried to run. 3 burned women grabbed his ankles, dragging him to the ground. He clawed at the dirt, screaming. Samuel charged them, but cracked burning hands latched onto his throat, forcing him down. Cain fought hardest. But even he buckled under the weight of 20 scorched limbs pulling him toward the pit. The air smelled like smoke and wet soil. Mara felt heat on her back. Her mother had wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The ashwoman whispered, Daughter, finish what they began. Mara shook her head violently. I don't want any of this. Her mother's voice cracked like shattering logs. You were born for all of this. The burned women chanted louder. The pit flared blinding white. The triplets screamed as the ashwomen began pushing them toward the edge. Samuel first. Reed next, then Cain, clawing, roaring, begging. Mara lunged forward, not to save them, not to doom them, but because something inside the pit was pulling her too. A force. A hunger. A gravity made of blood and death. Her mother grasped her arm tightly. Daughter, step into the fire with me. Together, we break the curse. The triplets screamed her name. Mara! Don't go, please. We beg you. But her mother's voice overpowered everything. Choose your blood. Choose your birthright. The storm fell silent. The wind stopped. The voices in the pit all inhaled at once. Mara stood inches from the rim. The triplets were half over the edge, held by burned hands, their faces twisted in terror. Her mother waited behind her, glowing, cracking, burning, all of them waiting for Mara to speak one single word. Storm clouds churned overhead like a mouth preparing to swallow the clearing whole. Mara opened her lips, and the pit answered before she could decide. A roar erupted from below, hot enough to sear the rain into vapor. A fiery hand shot up, massive, skeletal, grabbing her mother's torso and dragging her downward. The first wife screamed, not with fear but triumph. The curse is broken. The ash women shrieked and began collapsing into smoke, dissolving like burned paper. The triplets were thrown backward from the pit, rolling across the clearing like rag dolls. And Mara was left standing alone as her mother disappeared into the depths. The pit slowly sealed itself, stones grinding over ash, closing like a huge mouth. Then, silence. Nothing but the hiss of dying rain. The triplets lay unmoving on the ground, breathing in shallow, broken gasps. The forest was still. Mara stood shivering, drenched, her mind hollowed out. The pit was gone, the ash women were gone. Her mother was gone, but the survivors of Iron Hollow, the triplets, were staring at her with a fear she had never seen in their eyes before. And then Reed whispered, voice trembling. "You opened the pit," Samuel added, choking. "You didn't kill her." Cain rose to his knees, shaking, eyes wide with awe and terror. "You freed her." Mara stepped back. Her skin was warm. Too warm. She looked down. A faint golden glow pulsed under her chest, right where her heartbeat thudded. The same glow her mother's eyes had. She stumbled backward again, because in that moment, she understood the truth. The curse wasn't broken. It had moved. Into her. And now, the Iron Hollow brothers knew exactly who they needed next. Not as a wife, not as a relative, but as their new first wife. The storm returned with a distant rumble, rolling across the valley like a warning. 3 voices echoed after her as she ran into the forest. "Mara, you belong to us now." Iron Hollow was supposed to be nothing more than a footnote in a forgotten county. A sealed valley. A dead family. A story buried under ash and shame. But curses don't end when bodies disappear. They end when the living stop feeding them. And Mara, the last surviving daughter of Iron Hollow, didn't escape the Triplet brothers. She didn't escape the pit. She didn't escape her mother. She simply took their place. Tonight you learned why the government walled off that valley, why locals warned never to follow the trail east of the river, and why every hiker who goes missing in those woods is never found. Because the Iron Hollow curse didn't die. It moved. And if you ever feel heat behind your ribs while walking alone at night, if you ever hear 3 voices calling your name in the same breath, if you ever see a burned woman standing just beyond the tree line, turn around. Do not answer. Do not look back. Some bloodlines aren't meant to survive, and some stories aren't meant to be remembered. But here, on Forgotten Remains, we remember the things the world tries hardest to bury. If you want more horrors pulled from the abandoned corners of American history, more stories the archives refuse to release, make sure you return here, because next time, the darkness might be closer than you think. Until then, don't stay in the woods after sunset.